afternoon, everybody. I hope, as Zach just asked you, there is still energy left. Just stay with us. It's only 30 more minutes to go, and then there is dinner outside and partying. So my name is Swantje. I'm the managing director of Diconium Data, so hosting this event today. And I have the honor to moderate this panel with the question if data mesh is still a buzzword or if it's really having an impact within companies who implemented that approach. So we just had the great first-hand introduction of Czernay to the data mesh approach. And now in this panel discussion, we would like to put emphasis on practical tips, on pitfalls and challenges, and when putting data mesh into practice. And therefore, I have 3 wonderful data mesh experts here on stage. And we are very excited to learn from your experience. And maybe, Sean, you can start to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit about your data mesh experience.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I lead the data platform department at Delivery Hero. So we're based here in Berlin, but we're a global organization. So we have brands for food delivery all around the world. And this distribution of different brands means distribution of data, right? So we already have a decentralized data world. And data mesh is a fantastic paradigm to help us bring all that together. And based on data product management, etc., it really fits really well for our organization. And I'm happy to talk more about it.
Okay. Devangana, would you like to continue?
Sure. Hi, I'm Devangana. I work at Freenow, and I lead the marketplace data teams, basically everything related to pricing and allocation matching at Freenow. Before this, I was at ThoughtWorks, actually around the same time when Zamak used to be at ThoughtWorks. So kind of saw data mesh coming into action from the very first blog that was published on Martin Fowler's website, and then every client of ours getting excited about knowing what data mesh is about and how does that impact them. It was quite interesting because there was a huge variety of clients or companies back then who were very interested about how does this fundamentally shift what they have been doing. And if you remember, like the precursor to data mesh was data lakes. So everyone was very busy building massive data lakes. So it was quite interesting to see that transformation happening. And now at Freenow, we have just embarked on the data mesh journey. And with Marketplace, we are fundamentally a mobility marketplace. So my teams being at the core of this transformation, it's quite interesting to see the challenges that come in when you go on to a data mesh implementation, but also fundamentally how it helps you, especially as a data team. So
So thanks for your introduction. And Alex, so we are colleagues, so happy to have you here on stage today. Could you shortly introduce yourself and tell us your experience with data mesh?
Yes, happy to do so. So I'm Czernay with Diconium, as you said. I'm responsible for the data studio we run in Hamburg. For the last roughly 25 years, I've been in the digital business, and for the last 20 years, mostly within digital agencies and business consulting. And during the time frame, I was mostly also in the data domains and did see many of our clients struggle with the different and mostly centralized concepts. And I could see the emergence of what ultimately led to what we now see within data mesh. So the first ideas of how you could change the overall setup within the teams, go away from a centralized setup to a more distributed one, and also where that generated new challenges. And ultimately, I would say what we see right now with data mesh looks like a very good solution to what we did see in terms of struggles during the last years.
Mm-hmm. So thanks for your introduction. Let's delve into the topic, and maybe we start with you, Devangana. So you've just mentioned you've been in consulting with ThoughtWorks some years ago, and you also know Czernay. So what was your first point of contact with data mesh?
Yeah, so as I was describing, this first blog around data mesh came out. Back then, I was in the offshore data lead role for North America market, so which fundamentally meant that any client that ThoughtWorks had in North America back then, which was US and Canada, and most of them were actually working with the offshore centers in India, they wanted to know what it means for them. I think a lot of these companies were kind of early adopters that wanted to kind of look at what it means. I think probably Zalando is a good example as well that started its journey very long ago.
Was it in 2018 or at what time?
Around that time, 2017, 18, when this shift started happening. It was also interesting how this was across different domains, and that kind of introduced its own complexity, because when you look at something like retail, it's not a very regulated domain. However, you do encounter a lot of business and data complexity. But on the other hand, there were healthcare clients in North America, which is a very regulated field. So how do you fundamentally look at decentralizing not just data, but a lot of policies? It was easy to govern it when it was centralized, very hard when you start looking at decentralizing it into different teams. Interestingly, a lot of government clients as well. Okay. And you can imagine, one of the most bureaucratic sectors when they were looking at decentralizing. So those were some of the early touch points where we had to look at what it would mean for different size organizations and also organizations on different stages of their data journey.
And how do you approach data mesh within your company now? So what is the biggest change?
Yeah, so Freenow used to have a centralized data team. We had data teams that were primarily discipline based, so data analytics team, data engineering, data science, and these were restructured into product teams. So data folks moved into product domains. Which also meant now starting to look at the data that we owned and everything around around data. Like some of the products would be your reports and models, and which domains do they fit in. One of the most challenging yet exciting part of this journey also is actually understanding our domains well. So if you can imagine, pricing and allocation runs marketplaces. And there's so much complexity. There's also a lot of interdependencies with other domains. So sometimes the journey is not as simple as looking at, say, 100 data assets that were formerly owned by central teams, and now you can divide them into 5 teams. Sometimes that division is not straightforward, and we are kind of in the similar stage where certain parts of this data mesh journey are easy, and some certain ones are very, very complicated.
Mm-hmm. So, Alex, out of our discussions, I know that putting data mesh into practice can mean quite a big change within teams. So what does it take, in your opinion, to make it a success?
Yeah, first of all, I think the basic understanding within the whole business that this is an organizational change. So I've seen many businesses where the leadership thought, okay, this is a new technology. We just put it into the IT department and let them do this. Obviously, this is not going to work. Mm-hmm. On top of that, obviously, you need to do this not with a big bang, but iteratively. And then what really drives the change is that you know what is the incentive for the different product or domain teams to make the data accessible to the others. Because if you just tell them, hey, become a product team and make the data available, the first time they get pressure within the day-to-day business, they will stop doing this if they don't have a very good incentive to continue with that. And that must generate ultimately the traction within the company to drive the whole change into every domain becoming a product-driven team and sharing data and thus driving this data mesh terminology.
So what does it mean in terms of the culture that a company needs to implement for that? Is there anything you would like to add on top, in addition of incentivizing those teams?
Yeah, I think what's essential to understand is that you do not just rip apart a central data team, distribute the data nodes into product teams, and then expect this to just work. Like every other team, also the data nodes need to have like a home. They must be able to exchange, and they must be able to learn from each other. And you also must make sure, and this often happens if you have smaller companies, that you don't put single people into an existing product team. They get lost there. And this is really essential to understand that especially data nodes need to have the exchange with each other, and you must provide this home to them.
So this was also my personal experience. So Sean, I learned together with your team, you are providing a data platform serving almost 5,000 colleagues. That's quite impressive. So can you tell us a little bit, how do you exactly provide those data products to 5,000 people, and what does the data platform mean in the context of Delivery Hero?
Yeah, excuse me. The first thing you should know is that the company has 50,000 people. So that's not 5,000 is not that many, and actually there's a lot more that we can do, right? If you want to have a really self-service platform and get everybody using the data, there's still a lot more that we can do. What we have is a set of technologies that allow any team, any part of the organization, to own the process of building out their data product end to end. So technically, it's all on BigQuery, and there's Airflow and all that kind of stuff. But it's really the philosophy behind what we build, so that there is no central team that needs to do that data engineering. There's the framework for that data engineering to be done somewhere else to prepare that data product. In addition to the support for the data engineer, we have support for governance topics, so like access control and flagging personal data, these kind of things that come as a consequence of working within this same system. So we can have what you might consider centralized governance, but it's implemented in the technology itself, not from a person going around and
like Czernay just mentioned, within the code.
Exactly, exactly. There's still room for decentralization, and especially setting up those rules. This is one point that has come actually really quite clear to me lately as we talk about data governance topics. The technology is not really enough. You can't just, okay, here's the technology, put this in a YAML file, and then, okay, it's personal data. There's a whole culture around this that needs to be built up. People need to know what does this actually mean, how to use this, how to put it all together into a workable system, how to maintain what is the life cycle of each of these individual data products, etc. That's a little bit more of a people topic or culture topic than a technology topic. So I see as in my role as leading the data platform, in Zhamak's diagram of the principles, it's really one piece of it. But it can't just be one piece of it, right? That data platform has to encode the other three principles, so that leading through the product, we can influence the overall culture.
Okay, so maybe one very interesting question concerning the federated governance model. So how are you handling especially quite sensitive data or data that are under privacy rules?
So there's no central team that's responsible for saying, I control access to this data. Data is owned by other people. So if it contains, by the domains, if it contains personal data or sensitive data, that team is responsible for controlling access to that. They don't have to do it manually. They do it supported by the platform. But they're the ones who have to make that decision. They're the ones who have to decide, okay, in this case, I don't know, we even have more issues than just personal data. We have antitrust issues. So this data should be available to this part of the company, but not this part of the company.
So it's pretty much sticking to the theoretical approach of Czernay or to her book.
Yeah. I think so. like she says, there's lots of work left to do. But sort of
just like to feel if it's really yeah,
the
coming into practice, yeah?
Yeah, the spirit is coming into practice, but there's a lot more that we can do to get it right and to get it really workable and to remove a lot of the friction that these teams have for really owning the data. And I think that she talked a lot about that, make it super, super easy for somebody who builds a data pipeline to just, okay, as a consequence, there's a data product coming out at the end. It's not so simple quite yet.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, Devangana, you have seen a few data mesh projects in your job life. So, what could companies do wrong when they implement data mesh as a concept? And what are the common pitfalls? So, what can we learn from it?
I can sit here for the entire evening listing them out, but I think there are some that Zhamak already mentioned, and completely agree with those because those are the ones that I've seen as well in my experience. I think the other one is what Alex mentioned actually, where without actually understanding what is it that you're trying to derive from data mesh, you just probably look at it as yet another thing that you need to kind of jump on and implement. And as an effect of that, you end up splitting your central team into such tiny teams that it's very difficult for them to actually operate effectively. So that's one of the questions that organizations need to ask themselves. What is it that they're trying to do with data mesh here? And if actually having one data engineer, one analytics engineer in each team would actually make them efficient and also solve their problems, or actually will it introduce more problems into the system? The other part is, and this is in the definition that Zhamak was also showing, it's a socio-technical change. And often, I think, because it also emerged from the technical community, people think about it as just pure technical change. But there are so many things that are social about it, and the change management aspect of data mesh is often forgotten. So very simple example, we talk about domain teams when we talk about data mesh, and this is a question that I actually asked in the previous summit as well, that I was part of a couple of weeks ago, that how many times do you actually see well-defined domains being created in your data mesh journey? Or do you, as data people, just get moved under the existing domains and existing teams, and then you have to kind of work with the structure that has already existed in the company? So sometimes the domains are actually not very well-defined. So I would say that it's fundamentally about what is it that the organization is trying to do with this change, and also ensuring that it is not just a data change. It needs to be an organizational change. It cannot just be restructuring of data teams or changing the way that data teams work, but it fundamentally also has to define how the organization derives data, value from the data that it owns, and doesn't alienate product people and tech people and other people in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how many domains do you have within Freenow?
So around 5 or 6. We have marketplace, marketing, operations, financial products, and our rider and supplier domains. So those are the major domains, and then we have subdomains under these.
Okay. Thank you. So Alex, what are the most important impacts from data mesh, and how long does it take to see first results?
I would say if you implement data mesh, it feels a bit like what we had a couple of years ago when we started the microservices architecture in IT. So you gain a lot of flexibility, and you even spark creativity within teams that were before that restricted, usually by the access to data or by the backlog of the central data team that is always full and hindered you from doing anything with the data. So you will suddenly see new ideas and new kind of developments within the company that were before just not coming up. And in terms of how long it takes?
Power and time.
Sorry?
Power and time to see first results.
Yeah. The point is, you always start such an endeavor iteratively, right? Usually you start with 1 or 2 domains that are the proof of concept that start the implementation. This is also where you learn what you need to build to make this work, like the central data platform where everyone needs to put the data on, or the system for the PII data to be GDPR compliant that the different domain teams can plug into. And from there, you take it on. And those first teams need to spark this idea within the company. And it's really highly dependent on how well these teams are able to communicate what they are doing and what kind of positive impact they gain from data mesh. So I would say you should not expect any direct change before 6 months. Obviously, I would rather say it will probably take a year and a bit of patience until it gets traction. But the beauty of it is that I would call it even network effect. Once you get some domain teams on the track, the others will follow because they see the positive impact, and that will make the transition ultimately faster.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the time when you saw the first impacts out of the implementation of data mesh? Was there a specific moment?
Actually, for us, we've been on this journey for less than 6 months. And personally, for my team itself, we've started to see changes because for us, a big part of the data pipelines was basically black box. You kind of work with the last mile data, and then that's what you use for your analysis. But now, within even 6 months, because we had to kind of understand the entire journey of data, now we actually have like almost weekly sessions with our engineers to understand what proxies are we capturing, what signals are we capturing, how does that translate into downstream data pipelines. So even with, I would say, a relatively small team for the responsibilities that we have, the amount of understanding that we've gained now of our own data and source systems is just tremendous as compared to where we were 6 months ago. So I think the iterative efforts do fare off very well, and I've seen that in action, fortunately.
Sounds good. Do you have something in mind, Sean?
The first time, no, I don't remember, but I can point to a really nice example that really stuck in my mind lately. This is with we have a team for our FinOps team, so the team that deals with finances for our cloud costs and operating all these sort of central licenses and all that kind of stuff. They've traditionally just their job is to control the costs, and they have some dashboards to help other people control the costs. And as a consequence of just sort of this thinking around data mesh about data product ownership, they made available as data products the underlying data to these dashboards. As kind of like, okay, it's there. Let's just see if anybody uses it. And people love this, right? So it was never really intended as, it wasn't a strategic thing or anything like that. It was just like, make this data available, and it sort of opens up a whole new way of optimizing our engineering organization. And I really like the spirit behind that, where the sort of something magical happens that you didn't expect to happen just because this data is very high quality and very well owned, and somebody stands behind it. It can be trusted, and people use it.
Okay, sounds good. So in your opinion, what do you think what happens to companies who are not developing in that direction? I mean, data mesh seems to be the only way to go these days, but there are a lot of companies who are still sticking to a more central approach or go even new approaches. What do you think is important for those companies?
I think the most important thing for all these companies, if they have a culture of real ownership, I don't really care if it's centralized or decentralized. The problem is that it's really hard for a central team to really truly own that data, because they're so separated from where it's produced and what it actually means. So I think what they lose is just a connection to that data, and they can't really offer it professionally. They couldn't sell this outside the company. But they still try to sell it within the company, and I think they're just...
It's taking the most energy of the teams to sell their own data, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Devangana, in many, especially non-tech companies, business and tech are still separated. Yeah? So that's a little bit the same page as Sean just told us. So what are necessary steps for a company before delving into data mesh? Are there any first steps to go? It was already answered by Czernay in her talk a little bit, but maybe you have something to add.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, if the companies start looking at data as something that is helping them grow their business, do better, expand, deliver better value for their customers, I think they'll figure out ways of how they can do that with the power of data. So fundamentally, if data is just an isolated department in the organization, and it actually is not making a dent in your organization, then any effort, whether that's data mesh or anything, would actually go waste. So I think it's also a very good reflection point for organizations to actually understand what do they want to do with data, and what is it that they're doing today that's not either efficient or effective, that they want improving, and where the data can play a role. And then you would start seeing a fundamental shift happening from what tools needs to be built, what platform needs to be built, to actually all of these just becoming a way to deliver what you want at the end of the day. And the conversation would actually shift to what is it that you want out of it. And this is why I think I feel data sits at a very beautiful place where it's part business, part tech, and it can actually help bridge that gap that has historically existed between tech and businesses. So I would say the moment the business and tech and data stakeholders sit together in the room to say how do they do better, whatever they have been doing, they would be on a very good journey.
So this was just like a final statement, but maybe to wrap up our discussion, Alex, what would be your 30-second final statement? What would you tell companies when they think to implement data mesh?
I would say the first thing you need to be really aware of is how important is data for your business model. I've seen too many companies that have data departments somewhere stocked away, where the data part is the essential part of the overall business. And they were far away from having a CDO like Czernay just mentioned during her presentation. And you need to be crystal clear about what data shall do for your company, and then you can decide if you want to implement a data mesh, and what force and how much financial effort you want to put into that.
Okay, so Sean, do you have a final statement for us?
I'm really inspired by these 4 principles of data mesh, and I think any company who really does value data, it goes back to that, if you do actually value data, then you need data to be owned. If you need data to be owned, then it has to be owned by the domain. Mm-hmm. If it's owned by the domain, then it needs to be supported by a data platform. If it's supported by a data platform, it needs to be governed, right? Like, so all these things, they're just almost consequences of the need to treat data professionally. And if you really care about data, you kind of have to.